Good to see you all. I'm very conscious that I'm between you and lunch, so I'll go as fast as I can. So I'm Carole Logan, and I'm Principal Engineer at Equator. So we are a digital transformation agency in Glasgow and in London, but clearly I'm from Glasgow. So if I speak too fast, so you can't understand me, again, give me a wave. I'm a Microsoft MVP and a 6-time Umbraco MVP. I think that the official term is like half of a Lee Kelleher. But you know, we'll catch up. He keeps getting more, that's why we can never catch up. And in the Umbraco community, I help organise the Glasgow meetup, and I'm also part of the Community Diversity and Inclusion group. So we are a kind of collaboration between HQ and the community to make sure that the friendly community stays as friendly as possible. So if you're interested or want to know more about that, me, Emma, Carole is here, or Erica, or Alice, or Yoka, who aren't here, like, just get in touch. Oh, and Seb too. And you can find me on all of these places. And this little badge here isn't just because I'm really nerdy and we all like to collect badges. The context of this talk is I recently, last few months, done my Azure AI Fundamentals certification, and I learnt loads, so that's kind of how I put this talk together. And I'm going to kind of guide you through some of what I learned there, and also put little sprinkles of where we could use it within Umbraco land. So first of all, artificial intelligence, crowd participation is welcome. What do you think of when you think of artificial intelligence? Yeah, cool. So if I'm a millennial, so 90s kid, Terminator. Like, as soon as I put up this definition, I just hear the Terminator tune in my head. Artificial intelligence is the creation of software that imitates human behaviours and capabilities. I just start to hear that film score, like it's how the story starts. But what I'm going to do today is try and be your Sarah Connor, I guess. Like try and be a really nerdy, less strong Sarah Connor to try and learn before it happens the pitfalls of where artificial intelligence can go so right and can go not so right. And when you do, has anyone here done the Azure certification for AI? Yeah? Yeah, or for other ones, yeah. I'm going on an adventure of doing like a lot of them, and there's so much to learn. And if you've done the AI one, or if you've studied for the AI one, the first thing that is on the Microsoft Learn syllabus is responsible AI principles, which I think is really important. Kind of getting cut in half a wee bit here, but it's fine. So before we even think about implementing AI or ML anywhere, we must think about these 6 things. So you might think of fairness and inclusiveness as the same thing, but they're not quite. So inclusiveness is, making sure everyone can use your system that's using AI. But fairness is making sure that any of these decisions that your system is making is done fairly. So we've probably all heard of the using AI to look through CVs and to get your candidates for your recruitment. But if that is then taking the people with the same qualifications, the same number of years experience in the same tech, but then filtering people out based on other features, then that's where it would be unfair. So we need to make sure that it's always treating everyone fairly. Reliability and safety becomes a real serious thing when it's AI, because quite often AI is being used for to try and mimic human behaviours. So if we think about self-driving cars, for example, if we don't think about reliability and safety, we're in trouble. If it's a system that's kind of critical, reliability of that is going to be really important, because if that's not there to make the decision, who makes the decision, I think privacy and security is probably an obvious one, but we need to make sure that if this is dealing with user information or any kind of personal details, we need to make sure it's secure. Transparency is a really interesting one, and it's around making sure that if you're using AI on a system, that it's clear what you're using and why you're using it. So if you go back to that example, if you're using AI to filter your CVs for your recruitment process, make it clear that you're using AI for that and what decisions it might influence. And accountability, I think, is a really interesting one. I'm glad they put it on the list, which is you can't just say, oh, well, the machine decided. Like there has to be the designers and builders and the owners of the AI have to be accountable for the decisions that it makes. So as I said, what I thought we could do is jump into a bit of the syllabus of the Azure AI exam and think about how we could use it as a community in our projects. So machine learning, I always think, sounds like a really, really scary thing. And it is if you're trying to implement it yourself, you know, it can grow exponentially. But it's often the foundation for an AI system, and it's how we like teach the model to act like a human, really, to make a prediction and draw conclusions from data. And everything really comes back to data. So how do machines learn? It's data. We give them good data, they can make good decisions. We give them bad data, they can make bad decisions. So everything, like, there's just data is everywhere in life, even if we don't necessarily work in tech. You know, every time we send a text, every time we use our phone, every time we look something up, we're giving data out into the world and into our own systems as well. So using this data to predict behaviors and make decisions could be really powerful. So we don't have to build our own ML models, thankfully, or not totally from scratch. We can use Azure AutoML. Has anyone used AutoML? No? So it's a process of automated, time-consuming and iterative tasks. So if we've got data that we need to always get the data, clean the data, and then process the data, if it's those kind of iterative tasks that are repeatable, then we can get AutoML to do that. And for all of the examples today, I'm going to try and give a code, but also a no-code way to do it. And I think Azure's really good at giving us those options. So for this one, there's a Python SDK. Don't know if there's any Python devs in. I've not done Python since uni, so I used the low-code one when I was playing with this. And I've got here actually the low-code example. So this is right from the Microsoft Docs. Oh, it's getting perfect positioning to get cut in half by the screens. But there's different options that you can drag in. And this one's saying we're going to get the data, we're going to clean any missing data, and then we're going to normalize the data. And you can just drag and drop these boxes in. There's a convert to CSV one there. There's all different ones out the box. And yeah, I'm not saying, you of course have to understand data enough to be able to understand what you want it to do. But you can get it to kind of do the magic for you, basically. So you know your data model, you can do the thinking, but the hard work, like the manual stuff, you can get Azure AutoML to do. I really struggle to say this word, so I'm going to concentrate real hard. Anomaly detection. I can only say it if I see if I stop really, otherwise I just can't. I'm like, it's like Finding Nemo when they can't say the other word that I can't say. Azure Anomaly Detector is an AI service with a set of APIs that enables us to detect anomalies in your time series data. You don't need a lot of ML knowledge for this, which is really great. And there's two main types. So there's the Univariate detector, where it takes like one variable, like revenue or cost, and the model is selected automatically based on the data pattern. And then there's a multivariate one, which is what it sounds like, with multiple variables. It kind of works with correlations to the underlying model used there is a graph attention network. And I'm just going to have a quick look at the univariate version. This time we'll look a little bit at code, but not so much. There are REST APIs. So here's what the post would look like. The bits in pink, yeah, they're just about shown on here, are the bits you would have to replace. So of course, your file of data, your subscription key and the resource endpoint, and that's all you would have to change, Postman, PowerShell, whatever you want to call it. And you can then get back a univariate, that word, detector to give you back this data type. So I've cut out a bunch of stuff. Otherwise, if you go on to this URL at the bottom, it would show you what the full data type would look like, but it gives you the expected values, whether it's an anomaly, negative, positive, all of this data. It gives you all of this just by you passing in your JSON file of data and telling it what you want to do, which is really, really powerful. And this is where it's taking concepts we already know. So you can either use the low code, or you can and I don't use just lightly, but you can just use a REST API, and it gives you this kind of processed data really quickly. And one of the ones I want to jump into a bit deeper is computer vision. Has anyone used the computer vision APIs in Azure? Yeah, it's pretty cool, yeah. So the Azure Vision Service gives you access to all these advanced algorithms to process images. So anyone who's done any image processing, I remember trying to do it in uni, I feel like it was like punishment. So that's made me really appreciate how hard it is. So you can process images and return information based on the visual features we're interested in. And Azure just has these criteria. It must be one of these formats. It must be less than 4 megabytes, and the dimensions need to be more than 50 by 50 pixels so that it's actually got something to analyze. And I've got some examples now right from the docs of some of the different types of computer vision API calls we can do. So we can have image classification is the first one, and it involves training the machine learning model to classify images based on their content. So it can look at this image and say, that's a taxi, because it's been trained on enough images that it knows it's a taxi. So you can use image classification to kind of classify what is on the image. You can use object detection, and the main thing here is, yeah, it's noticing, yeah, cyclist, car, bus, but it's in a box, so it'll kind of give you a boundary box of, I've detected an object, and it's in here. But then there's, to take that a little bit further, there's semantic segmentation, so it's pixel by pixel. Yeah, it still knows it's a cyclist, it still knows it's a car, still knows it's a bus, but it's not got the boundary box, and there's much less margin for error, so if you have to get it kind of pixel to pixel, then this is a really good one. And so for traffic monitoring, for example, was the example that was given on the docs. Image analysis, this one's where you can have fun because it tries to give you an analysis of the image. So obviously on the docs, to give a good one, it's like, oh, it's a person walking with a dog on a street. But I always think it's quite funny if you try and give it random images and see how it describes it. But you can create solutions that combine the machine learning models and advanced image analysis techniques to give you like tags, really. So thinking about how we could use this in Umbraco, you know, we could, I'm pretty sure I've seen an example before that someone had on publish of an image generate these tags, and then you can kind of tag your images, maybe even create alt text. So that's always a thing that's really important for accessibility, but editors don't always prioritize. So we could have on publish of an image, have it go to Azure and generate alt text, which is how we can use AI to help certain users, you know, folks that rely on alt text and screen readers and so on. Also good for SEO, I think, so win-win. Face detection, analysis, and recognition. So this is like where it gets a bit creepy, right? So the object detection can locate human faces. It can tell that it's a face, so that's one element of it. It can say, yep, that's a face. And then it can analyze the face and kind of give you some features. And then you can actually train it to recognize people. So we could give it a picture of Emma and it would say, hey, that's Emma. She's right here, sorry. So that's where I think people get a little bit creeped out by AI, because, yeah, it can know you, or it just knows the pixels that are you, but it can still know who you are. And optical character recognition, I kind of feel like this is one that's been around forever. I feel like we've been talking about like OCR since like early days of, wouldn't even have been called AI, it would have just been called like, no, it's not, but it's in their AI services. So yeah, optical character recognition, it's really just, you know, recognizing that what those characters are in that language, and giving you the text. So like reading text from images and being able to give you that digitally, which, although it feels like it's been around forever, is still super powerful, I think, especially in a lot of kind of digital transformation projects. There's still a lot of businesses using paper. There's still a lot of things happening on paper, people filling in forms, and we'll get to that. But again, could be quite cool if you used this on publish of an image on Umbraco, to either create that alt text or create the tagging, or even to kind of, based on what it might say, stop someone from uploading it potentially. So if we want to try and moderate the content that's been added, could be quite powerful. So within Azure Computer Vision, these are the kind of key themes. So there's the computer vision. There's, which we've just chatted about, so we can extract tags and analyze images. There's custom vision, which is what it sounds like. You can customize, you can train your own model. You can give it a bunch of your own images and it can start to train a model based on that. There's the face API, which as I've described can not only like detect but recognize faces. And then there's the form recognizer, which as I mentioned is maybe not the coolest part of Azure AI, but can be really, really useful for businesses that still use a lot of paper forms, invoices, receipts, that kind of thing. So again, here's how like easily we can call it. So here's the endpoint, and you can give it your the endpoint address, and you can just tell it which visual features you're looking for and any details you might be looking for, the language, and you can give it the model version as well. That's kind of which Azure has several AI model versions you can give it. And you can ask for these features, or tell it you want to find celebrities or landmarks, and it will give you back that in the JSON. And there's a really good example here on this URL at the bottom there. This is one of the examples. You can like pick a few images on it. I think you used to be able to upload any image and get it to analyze it for you back when I was first playing with this, but they've got it limited to their ones for now. I guess they were just taking up too much Azure resources with people uploading random images. But this is what it does. It's a nice representation of the data that the JSON would give you back. So it can say it is 100% confident that it's outdoors. It's pretty confident there's skyscrapers there, but of course the line covers it. But that one there, it's 14%, says highway, which shows, because it's these lanes of traffic, it thinks it could have quite a low likelihood that it's a highway, but it's not, because it can tell from the context that it isn't, which I think is quite a good example. And you can give a description, so it says a street with cars and buildings, and you can also use it to kind of moderate whether it's kind of dodgy content that someone's trying to upload, and it gives you a confidence rate on whether that could be adult content as well. So again, I feel like we could really use this in, not just in the back office when people are uploading images, but maybe even like form submissions or anything where we might be using, allowing users to upload. Form recognizer, as I say, isn't the coolest thing, they're the most exciting thing, but actually probably for a lot of businesses could have the most impact, right? So we can accurately extract text in key value pairs and kind of take this manual paper, kind of structured, I guess, if it's an invoice, but it's not structured digitally, into structured JSON data that we can then use however we want to. And I was thinking, I don't think it's quite possible with the current version of the forms headless, because I think you still need to have, it still needs to be on a Razor page for now, you still need to have an anti-forgery token. But I was thinking if the forms APIs became fully headless, the Umbraco forms I should say, how cool would it be if you could have read forms from paper forms and then put them in Umbraco forms as submitted forms, and then that way all your digital and paper forms were the same. So I'll need to chat to someone from HQ about whether that would be possible with the headless API. Knowledge mining is another concept I just want to jump quickly into and then back out. It's a term used to describe solutions that involve extracting information from large volumes of data. It's often unstructured, but to create a searchable knowledge store. So I think this is one I know a few folks are using to use Azure Cognitive Search for your Umbraco search projects. Got a few nods, yeah. So this is one I know that the Umbraco community is already using. Probably wouldn't say AI, but it's part of the AI and ML collection of Azure features. And you can use Azure Cognitive Search to use those built-in API capabilities in Azure. You can do image processing, content extraction, means you can now search on like images and PDFs and all of those things that maybe out the box search you wouldn't get. You can now give an even more powerful search on your site. And natural language processing is a big part of Azure AI. So it's the area of AI that deals with creating software that understands written and spoken language. So with NLP, you can analyze and interpret text in documents and emails and other sources. You can interpret spoken language and synthesize speech, and you can automatically translate that as well, and interpret commands and determine appropriate actions. So that last one we've probably all said, "Hey Google," or Alexa, or any of those things. That's that interpreting commands and determining what the appropriate actions are. So within Azure NLP, we have these 4 kind of key themes. We have the language API, so that allows you to analyze text, kind of train language models for spoken or text-based commands. The translator is what it sounds like. You can kind of translate more than 60 languages the last time I checked, but I feel like every time I check, Azure's adding to that, which is great. Speech, to recognize and synthesize speech to translate spoken languages. And Azure Bot, so this is the service that provides the platform for conversational AI. Has anyone used the Azure Bot services? Yeah, a few folks, yeah. So the speech service allows voice-enabled apps to transcribe speech and kind of produce natural sounding text to speech as well. I think, I'd hope, that it's Azure, the kind of AI services that are behind Microsoft Teams. So when we all went to using Teams at the start of the pandemic, if you have this accent, you noticed that it wasn't great. I've used it again recently, it's gotten better. It's understanding who is speaking and what they're saying a bit better than it did. I feel like everyone going to work from home and using Teams must have given them so much data to train the models on, and hopefully much more diversity in the voices it was translating as well. So yeah, it can do speech to text, so those kind of captions, can do text to speech, speech translation, verifying and recognizing speakers. So as I say, even in Teams now, it will say, Carole says this, or this person says this. And voice commands, so those kind of voice first experiences. And as I say, having an accent that sometimes is hard to understand, I think it's fine. But you've probably all seen these videos of Glaswegians shouting out, Alexa, please understand. So those things can be quite funny, but when it's then a critical thing for someone to use a service or you'd be able to have the AI do what it needs to do for them, it can then become part of that inclusiveness and fairness thing as well, to make sure that everyone can use the services that you're providing. Language service, so these can, you can give it chunks of text, let's say content from a CMS maybe, and it can extract key information. It can summarize text as well. So we could use it to, maybe there's a rich text editor, you click publish, it can summarize that, it can provide tags from it. We can also have some sentiment analysis as well, so we can say, say it's someone submitting a form, an Umbraco forms, maybe we could send it to a different workflow depending on whether it was a positive sentiment out of their message or a negative one. Could be quite powerful. We can classify text, we can answer questions, and we can understand conversations and translate text too. So as I say, I wanted to jump in a little bit to sentiment analysis, because I think it could be really great for our clients that you build Umbraco workflows for, if we can take the input that users are giving us to our forms, and we can decide what we want to do with that content. Maybe one goes to the top of the queue if they're really angry, or if it's something really critical, and if it's positive feedback, although it's important, probably doesn't need someone to respond to straight away. Has anyone used the sentiment analysis? Yeah? Oh, cool, I'm going to come talk to you later. And again, here's how easily we can use it. So we can just fill in these pink things here. The main thing is you can give it the kind of test payload, and it will give you back a model of whether it's positive or the likelihood of being positive and the likelihood of it being negative. It always kind of gives you a number. I think it's between 0 and 1 in this case, where you can make a decision based on that. So you could even, if it is within a form workflow, a little bit like the reCAPTCHA one, you could give it like, okay, what do you want to set it to? Do you want to set it to be really positive, really sure around its analysis, or less confident? Question answering. So this is one that I had a little bit of a play around with. So question answering allows kind of cloud-based NLP solutions that allows you to create natural conversations over your data, and to find the most appropriate answer, to then give an answer. So think a chatbot basically, but when someone's talking to it, where does it get the questions and the answers from? So I decided to try and create an Azure bot, but with no code. unless the rich text editor HTML. I didn't go into the HTML, I just used it as a rich text editor, so I'm saying it's with no code. So this was on my own site that I already had. I created a little bit of FAQs, and the main thing that I had to do is, as long as you have like a way for it to differentiate what's the question and what's the answer. So I used like a H1, I think, or H2, and a P tag for the answers. And I saved that, and I published it here on my site. I really worry that sometimes that like Google will get it and people will think it's a real Q&A page, but it was really just to test out this bot. And I can then use the language studio. So of all of the things that I've mentioned, there's a language studio, there's a speech studio, there's all these different Azure studios that you can do the no-code version, so you don't have to use the APIs. So this is using language studio and the custom question answering. So I gave it that URL of that page. And added it as a source. And this is going to be quite small, sorry. But what Azure done was it then split it into what the question was, what the answer, the context, the question, and the answer. And because I had kind of marked it up as like a heading and then text, it was able to differentiate what was the question and what was the answer. And I didn't have to change anything in there. I could add some alternate phrases and things like that, but I decided to try it out purely with what was in my rich text editor. And there I was hopefully this will autoplay. Yeah. So I was able to type, some of my questions. What is Umbraco? And it will come back with the answer that was in my rich text editor and published on my page. So this was really a kind of Friday night board. Thought I would see. I'd done the exam and wanted to kind of try playing it around, and that's kind of my test for developer experience on like new tech or even like a release candidate or whatever. It's like, can I figure this out with like not a lot of brain power left under a blanket, probably watching TV? And I could. I'd done the no-code version. Of course, with a lot of the prior knowledge that I needed to let me do that, I already had an Umbraco instance. I could already publish that content, but was able to get from like nothing to this chatbot embedded in my site. I don't know, a couple of hours, I think, probably with tea breaks. So you can get there without coding relatively quickly, and then you can give it your published page. It will do this, and it then gives you an HTML JavaScript widget that you can then embed back in your site. So that's what I've done here. I embedded it as a little chatbot back in my site just to kind of try and get the full experience of how you could do that. In reality, I would probably want to give it some alternate phrases. Like you'll notice I'm typing the exact question that was in the rich text editor, but you get what I mean. You can give it kind of alternate kind of phrases that it can use. And that is a quick-ish summary of the different types of services, low-code and code-driven services that you can use within Umbraco AI. But what I wanted to cover just before we finish, and I know I'm between you and lunch, is some of the risks and considerations we really should think about when we're using AI. And the first one here is bias. So AI is only as good as the data we give it. So if we give it biased data, it's going to give us biased results. And again, the example of the kind of HR system one, if it has a certain view of what a developer looks like and sounds like and what characteristics their CV might have, then it will build, if that's what the data says, that's what it will do in the end, and it's what it has done. That's not hypothetical. I think it was Amazon, someone built that. And those errors can cause real harm. Now, so if think self-driving cars, if it can only recognize certain types of faces as faces and other faces not as faces, then more people are going to be hurt, literally hurt, not even emotionally hurt or left out or excluded, literally hurt by AI not working properly. So the data we give it and how we train these models really needs to be inclusive of all people, or we simply can't use these systems. And that's always where these self-driving cars or any of these ones fall down, is they just don't recognize humans as humans, certain humans as humans, which just isn't fair. And when you think about UX, we're used to UX of, can someone use this screen? Can they click that button? Is it obvious they should click that button? UX is totally different with some of these things, when it's trying to not just understand how people or what they're trying to do, but what they might try and do. So predict human behavior is always hard, and especially when it's text or speech driven. So I'm using my posh voice now, okay, but if I wasn't, a lot of what I say might not be totally understandable, maybe to some of the international folks that are here, maybe some of the English folks that are here. So it's a lot more important that UX is global. So we've got, that kind of gets taken out of the way when we've got a CTA, and when it's a certain colour, I know to click on it. But when it's voice driven or text driven, it can be quite colloquial. So we'll need to make sure that it's as inclusive as possible, and that's where testing and making sure that it's usable by as many people as possible. And accessibility is UX as well, so making sure it's accessible to everyone, regardless of what device they're on or what circumstances they might have. And I think the last consideration and risk, maybe, is that people are people. So we can try and build software to predict how they might act or what decisions they might make, but people are people. And in my experience, when you try and talk to people, say, okay, chat us through this manual process that you do, they'll chat you through it, and then next time, they'll chat you through it slightly differently, and then next time they'll chat you through it slightly differently, because they've got different ways that they do these processes. So if we're trying to automate those processes or to be able to predict them, people do things in different ways each time, depending on what mood they're on, depending on what maybe the data is. So yeah, people can be hard to predict. So that's a big consideration with AI too. And I think hopefully just about on time. That's me done. I've not got time for any questions, but either online or in person, just give me a shout and I'll be happy to chat about it.